Trying to revive the Faction Wars series that I did, breaking down each faction and how to go about beating it and the champions and the approaches you want to use. We're going to be starting with Shadowkin faction today. So let's get into it. Welcome, I'm the DeadwoodJedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video, and as I said, we're going to be looking at the Shadowkin faction for Faction Wars and see if we can't figure out, approaches to take with this, give you my best advice as far as how you want to go about doing this. Now, as always, when we're doing this series, got to break out a couple of factors, right? One, I am going to try to do it without any legendaries, right? Every faction is a little bit different. Shadowkin's actually one of the harder ones to do if you don't have any quality legendaries on it. But I'm going to show you the approach that I would take, and I'm going to show you a run doing the top stage, stage 21. Hopefully we'll get 3 stars when I do it. It's a little bit tricky for sure, and it's not going to be easy to do on your first time through. We're going to be using epics and rare champions in order to do this. I'm going to show you my approaches and how to go about doing that. We'll talk about different champions that are going to be available for you and ways you're going to want to do it. Now, my gear is probably going to be a little bit better than what you have available for you, right? I've been playing this game for a long time. I don't have bad gear anymore on my account, or at least not a lot of it. I do try to limit it somewhat, so I'm not putting my best gear on my champions, but maybe you're not going to be able to get to all these stats. Just remember, if you're at the end stages of finishing Faction Wars, it is worth it to actually take your best gear off your main champions and put them on these champions just to clear the stage, at least for the first time through, right? So even if you can't gear these champions this way all the time, you can hopefully get it for the 1 or 2 times that you need to just to finish it out. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. Obviously, you want to pay attention to the total stats in the gear sets, and there's more than a few ways to go about doing this. I just built this one team. There's going to be plenty of other options, and honestly, I could probably make this a little easier myself by using some different sets that are available too. So keep all of that in mind. Anyway, what I want to do is we're going to look at the bosses that are available on this for this faction, so you have an understanding of like approaches we want to use, styles and stuff. We'll look at all the individual champions that are available in this faction and some options that you might want to go through. Then we'll do an actual run of stage 21 so that you can see how I would go about doing it. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one that comes out. And of course, if you enjoyed today's music, we have that SoundStripe link down below in the pinned comment description of this video, and you can use code DeadwoodJedi to save 15%. So first things first, we're going to look at all the bosses that are available here, and we're going to try and figure out the different approaches that we can take through it. We'll start off on stage 7, Incinerator. Now, stage 7, pretty much, if you have champions that are level 60 or even 50, you should be able to clear this without too much difficulty. It's not really that hard. It's more just like, am I strong enough? Because most of the time, you can just beat the boss down first, right? Just beat the boss down, and then you don't have to worry about it. That's what's kind of going on here. There's going to be, with this boss, right, he places poisons, does a lot of turn meter decrease, and has an AoE with True Fear. This is the Incinerator. Also has HP burn every time you hit them. So that's always very, very annoying, but it's one of the easier bosses to get through, honestly. Now, cleansing and blocking debuffs is generally going to be the way to go with this one, as with most of these bosses, to be fair. But with this one, you can pretty much just beat them down. Just pretty much beat them down. Maybe you need some healing sets, some, regen, bolster, immunity gear, or immortal gear, I should say, would be pretty helpful. Bringing in block debuff or cleansing would definitely be good as well. There's just not a lot of that in this faction, so that's definitely going to be one of the things that's going to make this a lot harder for you. But generally, just be strong enough to beat them down. All right, stage 14 is the Protector. The Protector's kind of an odd one and a little bit annoying, can be, especially if you're not really, strong enough with your champions and your gear. The big thing, so he has an AoE as an A1, and that has a pretty good chance of placing fear on your champions. Now, it's not True Fear, which is good, and it's only 1 turn, right? So, obviously block, debuff, cleanse, those are always going to be valuable, but generally you can pretty much ignore a lot of that, I feel like. One of the things that you might want to bring in is a lot of actual CC in this, right? Freezes, so champions like Gory could be really good. Stuns are really nice. Stun sets would be definitely beneficial. The reason why is it's got 2 minions. And the thing is, with his A2, he revives them all to full HP and places a sleep debuff on himself. So what does that mean for us as far as trying to deal with this? Well, one, you got to kind of ignore the minions. And you got to ignore the minions. Don't kill them. It's not really worth it because he's just going to revive them. So just focus on the boss. Try to take him down as quick as you can. So a lot of damage is helpful. And the reason why I said the CC is if you can freeze the minions or stun them, then they can't do anything to you. And that can be a good way to kind of deal with them, on the side, right? A3 ability attacks with an enemy with 2 random allies, places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn if all allies are dead. So again, let's not kill the allies. And the allies use their default skills. Now the allies are annoying. They definitely will hit, decently hard. So you got to be a little bit careful, right? Ally protection, block, what's it called? Increased defense, those kind of things will definitely be helpful for you on this. But my recommendation, honestly, is just attack the boss and try to take him down. This isn't the hardest of bosses out there, right? Usually pretty weak. You can usually, single target him and just whip him down as quick as you can. Bringing in decreased defense is definitely a bonus. There are champions in this faction that can do that for you, so it shouldn't be much of an issue. And then stage 1 is the Dueler, which is one of the hardest bosses in this game. And that is definitely a problem, especially for this faction because of the lack of cleanse, because of the lack of block debuff champions available, and the lack of revivers available. All those things actually become really big issues with this faction. And so this one's definitely going to be hard. You're going to probably need a manual just to get that 3 stars the first time. And then after that, you can farm whatever, but we just looking to get those 3 stars the first time through. Reason why he's so tough, right? A1 ignores defense and does damage based on max HP. So the more HP you have, the more damage you take, and it ignores your defense. So it's very hard to mitigate this. The best ways to do it are obviously with strengthen buffs or with ally protection. There are ally protectors in this faction that are extremely good. So that is definitely the way I would recommend going. You can also use things like guardian sets, right, to help mitigate some of that damage as well. But yeah, this one's gonna be tough for sure. Revivers are really good as well. Shields are really good also. So there are more than a couple ways to kind of deal with this. Problem is this faction doesn't really have a ton of those in it, so it can be a little bit more tricky for this faction as opposed to others. A2 removes all debuffs from this champion, places a true fear debuff on random enemy for 1 turn, and places a stun debuff on all enemies except that enemy for 1 turn. These debuffs can't be resisted, so resistance isn't going to help you here. And then it grants him an extra turn where he does his A1 ability, right? So again, things like ally protection, block debuffs is very helpful here. Definitely something I really recommend if you can bring that in as well. But it is kind of tricky. Now, the real hard part is his passive, where he fills his turn meter by 2% for every 1% HP they lose when attacked. This is counted from the damage taken per hit. So it can be really tricky because he's going to kind of boost his own turn meter. Very slow boss, like 165 speed or something like that. But gets that turn meter boost every time he loses some HP, which is problematic off of every hit. So trying to time stuff can be a little bit hard to figure out because based on the damage that you're doing. But again, block damage, really nice if you can fit it in here. So this is the hard part with this boss, right? The more you beat him up, the faster he goes. And of course, that A1 is absolutely killer ability. Not to mention that true fear and stun can really kind of, hurt your team as well. So again, ally protection, really, really valuable if you can bring it in. And so that's kind of how the bosses work for Shadowkin. Now, as always with this Shadowkin, with any of these factions, really, we want to figure out what is it that we're going against and what is it that we need to bring in, right? So when we're talking about, stage 21 specifically, right, we're always, if we talk generally, let's talk generally, right? When you're going through the waves, all that stuff, right? What do you want? You generally want damage. You want ability to do damage, and then you want to stay alive and be protected, right? So things like revivers are always good, especially if you have squishy champions that can help make sure you get that 3-star, right? Right at the end, they go down, you can bring them back. AoE decreased defense is very valuable. Obviously, it helps you do more damage, and when you kill the enemy, they can't kill you, so that's good. Some form of healing or protection is valuable as well. So ally protection, continuous heals, increased defense, strength, and all those are great to have as well. You do need somebody to do damage, of course, right? On top of that, and then of course, having champions that can, control the enemy, especially with the waves, is super valuable, whether that's through CC skills like stun or freeze or provoke. That can be really good. You can use sets for that as well, like the provoke and stun set. Even the frost set can be useful in this sense, as well as, of course, increase speed and decrease speed, right? So these are all the things we're looking for. Now, the legendaries in this faction, you can see I have a lot of them. They're extremely good, right? In general, these are some of the best legendaries in the game, whether we're talking Kyoku, Jintoro, Kimi, Ninja, Michinaki, Harima, Riho, Yumeko. I'll leave Jingwan and Genzin for YST here, but all these champions really do bring a lot to the table. So there is a lot to like as far as that goes. But of course, we want to do this without those because not everybody's going to have them, and the ones you get are going to be pretty hard to figure out. So what are we looking at? Well, if we go down actually to the rares, these are some of the worst rares in the game by a faction. Just they're not good. Fnatic can be a decent damage dealer, right? He does have decreased defense on the A1, does give him does do some buff transfer. He does have an increased attack buff he'll put on himself. He also has a cleanse ability on this skill, so that can be useful. So of the rares, he's one that I would look at maybe using. But the one I really want to recommend is Odachi, because Odachi, he gives a shield for himself, right, which is nice on an AoE skill, but more importantly gives block debuff and increased defense for all allies. Now, the 1-turn ability on the allies, 2-turn for himself, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, which is nice. He also has a provoke on the A1. All these things, especially being a defensive-based champion, can be really, really useful. And he's somebody I'm going to bring into this team that I'm going to try and do 21. So I definitely recommend utilizing him. He's one of the only block debuff champions that is available. Now, a hard part here is I don't think there's any. I think there's one reviver in this faction. Now I got to kind of go through and remind myself. Yes, I believe it's Kinagashi here. And I'm not sure if this is a Doom Tower champion. I don't think so. I think you can get him, but revives an ally, 50% HP and turn meter, and places increased defense buff on the ally. But it's a single revive, not the best, right? He does have like a one-person ally attack ability with turn meter fill, right? And this does decrease turn meter here on the A1. So one of the things you can do, especially with the boss, is decrease his turn meter, right? So that actually can be really useful ability. Kinagashi would be somebody I'd like to bring in. I don't think I'm going to in this attempt, but he definitely somebody I would be looking at and saying, oh, that might be somebody that I really want to bring in for this, for this boss here, right? You have more than a few damage dealers, right? Whether we're talking about Genbo here, we're talking about Oboro there. Even I think Taya does like some poisons and stuff. There's more than a few there. We have, some unusual champions like Wuji, who can do some damage to like this counterattack and perfect veil she places on somebody. We've got Suiren, who I really like. Poisons, weaken, decreased defense, right? As a single target debuffer damage dealer. Actually, I think that AoE, is this AoE? Yeah, decreased defense is AoE, so Suiren would definitely be a good choice, right? Especially for the waves. Chronoru, right, can do some damage for you. Brings weaken, block buffs. Not my favorite champion, but it has some options there. There's obviously champions like Sachi, brings decreased accuracy, which is always nice. Decreased crit rate, leech, turn meter fill, increased attack. Benchi, who I will be using, decreased speed on the A1, turn meter reduction on the A2, poisons on the A3. A lot of multi-hit abilities. These are some champions I would be kind of, keeping in mind as damage dealers. You don't need a lot of them. Maybe just one, in all honesty, because the ones you want are going to be Chani, of course, is really good. There's a lot of solid champions here, right? You can go through and figure out which ones you want to use, but the ones I want to highlight are actually the support champions, because I think that's what's going to keep you alive. So champions like Taragi. Taragi is absolutely the best option here, right? Not only do you have ally protection, which is massive on a 3-turn cooldown, you have reflect damage on himself, poisons that go out there, and shield. Provoke as an AoE is really strong. Decreased attack, single target, really strong. And of course, his passive. Everything about Taragi makes him a killer for this faction, but I'm not going to use him because we know he's a killer. So I'm going to try and do it without him. Another champion that I really, really recommend is Hitatsu. Now, there are a couple champions that do leech in this faction, And Hitatsu is one of them, right? Does have a leech on his A1. Decreased attack, AoE, but more importantly, has continuous heal and increased defense here with the A3. There aren't any champions that do that. So that is definitely something that I really recommend looking at. Now, Hitatsu does have this nice passive that cleanses fears, true fears, and stuns and stuff like that. And that can be really nice against this boss, right? Gives you an opportunity to still take an attack. Generally isn't targeted, but you know, if he is, that can be really good. The big thing, like I said, though, is he brings that continuous heal. There is like no healing in this faction. And that is the biggest problem that we have here. So Hitatsu is almost mandatory. Not necessarily mandatory, right? If you can get leech out during the waves and heal up during the waves, you should be in pretty good shape. The boss you will kind of want to take down fast enough where you don't have to worry about healing. And that's going to be the tricky part, right? You really can't take many of his attacks and survive it. So it's going to be really important just to go quickly on the boss. But Hitatsu, I think, is going to be really vital getting through the waves. Kunoichi is another champion I really like. I'll be using Ally Protection here, which I love on the 3-turn cooldown. Leech ability as well as Weaken. Definitely a good one. And when his damage goes really low, places block damage on herself. So Kunoichi is definitely somebody else that I really recommend. So those are 3 champions that I really would highlight as choices for you in Taragi, Hitatsu, and Kunoichi. And then, of course, Masamoto. Masamoto is kind of a decent choice. Increased defense and turn meter fill, decreased attack. Defensive based champion is always going to survive a little bit better. But we also have to remember, and this is always a little bit tricky, we do have to remember boss ignores defense. So the defense stuff is only so valuable, really, when it comes right down to it. Urigen is an interesting one too, right? Decreased attack, shield on him, and provoke, which is pretty solid. And then also has can ignore some defense, whatever. So like this, he's not a bad option, Urigen. That's not a bad option as a champion to bring in. Burengiri, I don't think really is great, and he does an AoE stun, which is great for CC actually. And he has a strengthen. Actually, I take that back. Burengiri would be in a very good choice to bring in, right? Because he's going to give you shield. Going to give you strengthen. Those are going to help with the boss, especially. Those are the two best ways to mitigate the damage coming in outside of ally protection. The provoke and the stun make him really good for the waves with the CC, and obviously, healing himself whenever an ally or an enemy dies definitely helps as far as getting through the waves and stuff like that with full health. You can go Burengiri, Kinagashi might be a really good combination to bring in as champions. Even if an ally dies, he can revive them. You can put him in a Guardian set, I think would be actually pretty darn good way to approach that as well. So there are definitely a few options as far as getting through this. And then, of course, the rest of it is just bringing the damage that we can. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do this faction with that, and we'll see if this is going to be possible. So I'm going to be bringing in, I've got Oboro, I've got Hitatsu, I've got Fenshi, I've got Kunigiri, Kunigiri, I believe the name is, and Odachi. So hopefully Fenshi can deal some damage and decrease turn meter. Oboro is really good at dealing damage, so that's gonna be great. Hitatsu hopefully can give us some healing, and Kunogishi can hopefully keep us alive as we go into this boss. So, one of the things I do want to point out is with these waves, right? Target the reviver, target the block damage. So I'm trying to take down Broadma, very first thing I want to do, so she doesn't revive. And then I'm trying to take out Maneater in the second wave, so he doesn't put up that block deep damage stuff or block debuffs and the unkillable ability. If I can do those 2 things, I can get through the waves pretty decently. So that's going to be key. So I'm going to get through the waves, and then when we get to the boss, I will get up there. Okay, we're here at the boss. Let's see how we can do this. I've done this several times. It's a big struggle. One of the hardest parts about this, obviously, is that this boss hits so freaking hard. And my team just doesn't hit quite hard enough to make it work. So it's a challenge. I don't know how else to put it. So we'll see if we can't make this work. Obviously, you know, there's some things we can do to help mitigate things. I don't have the block debus. No, I screwed up. I don't know how I screwed up, but I did. Oh, let's see where this goes. All right, well, everybody's stunned and feared. Okay. Took the hit, but we have the ally protection on. That's obviously the most massive out of all the things that we can have. We do some turn meter. Hopefully give us a chance to come through again. If we can't get decreased attack, that's good. That'll help mitigate some of the damage for sure. Try and get leech up so we can do some healing. Try and get decreased defense so the healing's even better. Survive. Okay, so we survived. Excellent. I don't know how. But we did. All right, decreased speed. That's going to be helpful as well. Healing up. We block debuffs. Do we need to? We don't need to yet. All right, I want to time it for that particular skill. Now, can we survive? This is not good. We lost. Oh, no. She's going to die. I can feel it. Maybe? Survived. All right. Decreased attack combined with the pretty low HP total is great. So that worked out really well for us. Okay, now we can drop turn meter again. Excellent. I'm hopeful we can actually finish this boss off here. You know what? It won't hurt. I don't think it's going to matter. Ally protection just in case. Big hit. Boom. Let me finish her off. Not yet. Oh, this will do it. This will do it. Yes. 3 stars. That's what I'm talking about. All right. That's a real challenge, guys. Like a real challenge to do. I did this probably half a dozen times trying to get to this point where I could actually 3-star. But the important part is it is possible. That's the key. I got through the waves with pretty close to full health. And then once we did there, you even saw, I didn't even have the timing right. I usually have Adachi put that block debuff up to make sure nobody takes any damage. And I timed that horribly wrong. Or nobody gets feared and stunned, which would have been big for us, give us some extra turns and stuff in there. But even without that, we were able to survive it. So we got a little lucky on who the boss targeted. So that definitely is going to be a factor. And maybe you have to redo it a few times so you get the right person targeted. But boy, this worked out really well. We didn't use any of the big hitters too, like Burengiri, Kunagashi, I think, is the one that does a revive, and Taragi. Didn't use any of those champions, no legendaries, and we were able to do this. So big thumbs up. So overall, this is one of the toughest bosses that you can go up against in Faction Wars. It does take a lot of work to get it done. For that first 3-star, manualing it is absolutely the way to go. But you're going to need to be, cognizant of how you're approaching it. Ally protection, shield, strengthen, right? You're going to need something along those lines. Reviver would be really nice in case one champion does go down. You'll be able to bring them up right before you kill the boss and hopefully get that 3-star. That's the goal. The other big part, bringing damage. You really do need to bring as much damage as you can. Now, you don't necessarily need to use a Totatsu, right? If you can build regen sets, mortal gear, some kind of healing, but your champions will need to heal at some point, especially getting through the waves, which are pretty tough on this one. So that's definitely something you're going to want to have to factor in as well. So that's kind of my recommendation as far as going through with this, right? You can see the approach that I took. The stats aren't crazy. They're definitely good, but they're not crazy. This is how I build most of my champions. Like, these stats are pretty mediocre, mid-level for me, maybe even lower end. So you can see that, to get to this point, it's not crazy gear that you need. It's going to be more smart team composition is really what's going to factor and make this easy for you guys to beat. But now you have a template of how to do it. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I do wish you luck on it. And that's all we got. So until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.